At exactly 6:14 hours on May 27, 2026, the South China Sea was not at peace. It had never been at peace. But this morning, what the sensors were reading was different. This was not a patrol. This was a posture. Taiwan's Combined Air Operations Center at Hsinchu Air Base registered the first contact at 6:11. A formation of 4 Shenyang J-16D electronic attack aircraft crossing the median line of the Taiwan Strait at flight level 280, flanked by 2 Chengdu J-20 stealth fighters holding 40 nautical miles to the west in a loose orbit. The IFF transponders were dark. No flight plan had been filed. No diplomatic notice had been issued. The PLA's Eastern Theater Command had simply decided that Tuesday morning was the right time to announce its presence. This was the second time in 7 days. The first patrol, May 20th, had been treated by Beijing as a message, a demonstration of capability. 14 aircraft, a deliberate crossing of the median line, a slow withdrawal after ROCAF interceptors made visual contact. The international press had called it provocative. Military analysts had called it calculated. What no one had said out loud, at least not on the record, was what Taiwan's 443rd Tactical Fighter Wing already suspected, that the first patrol had not been a message. It had been a measurement. They had been watching how long it took Taiwan to respond. They had been mapping the gaps. And now, on May 27th, with a second formation already feet wet over the strait, the second half of the operation was beginning. 0617 hours. Hsinchu Kaok, Taiwan. Watch Officer Colonel Huang Weilin did not wait for confirmation from the Ministry of National Defense. The ROC Air Force's Scramble protocol had a 90-second authorization window for reactive intercepts within the ADIZ, and the clock had already started. 2 F-16V Block 70 Vipers from the 21st Fighter Group were wheels up by 0619, loaded with AIM-120D AMRAAMs and AIM-9X Sidewinders. Their AN/APG-83 AESA radars already painting the J-16D formation at 187 kilometers and closing. But Colonel Huang was not looking at the radar return of the J-16Ds. He was looking at the ocean. Because 40 minutes earlier, a P-3C Orion from the 33rd Anti-Submarine Squadron out of Penghu had reported an anomaly, a thermal layer disruption 220 kilometers southwest of the Penghu Islands. Subtle. The kind of signature that, in any other week, might have been attributed to a geological upwelling or a whale migration track. But Lieutenant Commander Chen Baoyu had been flying this route for 11 years, and he had filed a formal sonar contact report at 5:41. Not a confirmed contact, a probable contact. A Type 093 Shang-class nuclear attack submarine, running deep, running slow, running silent, positioned directly beneath the patrol corridor that the J-16Ds were now occupying overhead. The aircraft above and the submarine below were not coincidence. They were architecture. 0623 hours over the Taiwan Strait. Median line. The 2 ROCAF F-16Vs reached the intercept point at 0623, closing on the J-16D formation at a combined closure rate of 1,100 knots. Call sign Typhoon 11, Major Lin Xiaofeng established visual contact on the lead J-16D at a range of 14 nautical miles. The Chinese aircraft did not deviate, did not alter heading, did not respond on guard frequency. Major Lin transmitted 3 warnings in Mandarin across 121.5 megahertz. 3 warnings in English. Silence on both. At the same moment, Typhoon 12, Captain Wu Ting-an, broke left on an order from Hsinchu CAOC, not toward the J-16Ds, away from them, toward the water, because the P-3C had just updated its contact report, and the word probable had been replaced by one word that changed everything: confirmed. The Type 093 was ascending. It had been running at 280 meters. It was now at 110 meters. It was coming shallow, which in submarine warfare doctrine means only one thing. It was about to do something. Launch a torpedo, deploy a special operations swimmer team, or come to periscope depth to transmit a burst communication that would trigger something else entirely, something that hadn't appeared on any radar screen yet. 6:27 hours. P-3C Orion, 2,200 feet, southwest Penghu. Lieutenant Commander Chen dropped 2 DIKSS sonobuoys in a crosshatch pattern at 0625 and had active returns by 0627. The geometry was clean. The submarine was a cylinder 110 meters long, beam approximately 11 meters, running at 7 knots on a northeasterly heading. That heading, if maintained, would bring it directly beneath the patrol corridor, directly beneath the F-16V intercept, and within 40 kilometers of the Penghu island chain, Taiwan's most strategically exposed forward position, home to the Magong naval base and a Patriot PAC-3 MSE battery that had been operational for less than 3 weeks. Chen immediately uplinked the contact data to Hsinchu CAOC and to the ROC Navy command ship PFG 1112 Changqian, which had been holding position 60 nautical miles northwest of Penghu since 4 o'clock on a routine patrol. Changqian's captain, Commander Shi Kuo-wei, received the uplink, read the coordinates, and within 45 seconds had ordered the ship to flank speed and began spinning up the ship's SH-60F Seahawk for an immediate ASW prosecution launch. Above him, the sky was filling with aircraft. Below him, the water was not empty. 0631 hours, Eastern Theater Command, Ningbo, PRC. What Taiwan could not see, what no Western intelligence asset had fully mapped, was what was happening 700 kilometers away in the hardened command bunker of the PLA Eastern Theater Command. The two-phase structure of the operation, designated internally as Exercise Iron Meridian, had been designed not as an act of war, but as a demonstration of what war would look like before anyone could stop it. The J-16Ds in the Strait were emitting deliberately, their Nanjing RDCSH jamming pods broadcasting across multiple frequency bands to degrade Taiwan's AN/TPS-70 ground-based radar coverage. Not enough to blind Hsinchu CAOC, enough to create a 4-second lag in the radar picture refresh rate. 4 seconds in a closing intercept is a geological age. The J-20s holding to the west had never been part of the formation. They were a tether. If the ROCAF F-16Vs vectored toward them, the J-16Ds would use that window to cross further east. If the F-16Vs held on the J-16Ds, the J-20s would advance. It was not a trap. It was a pinball machine, designed to keep Taiwan's interceptors busy while the submarine below operated uncontested. At 6:31, the Eastern Theater Command uplinked a new instruction to the Type 093. The instruction was a single 3-digit code. In PLA submarine doctrine, that code authorizes the transition from surveillance posture to active operations posture. The submarine did not receive orders to fire. It received orders to become visible on purpose. 0634 hours. ROCAF Typhoon 11, visual on J-16D formation. Major Lin Xiaofeng was 400 meters off the left wing of the lead J-16D when the Chinese pilot finally made a move. Not aggressive, precise. The J-16D rolled 30 degrees left, dropped 2,000 feet, and turned its nose 15 degrees toward the Penghu Islands. It was a gentle maneuver, almost casual, but Lin had studied the PLA playbook at the ROCAF Staff College, and he recognized the geometry instantly. The J-16D was not threatening Penghu. It was drawing Lin's radar off the water, off the P-3C, off the submarine. Lin immediately called Hsinchu CAOC on secure data link. Typhoon 11. Contact J-16D executing southern diversion maneuver. Assess main effort is subsurface. Request authentication for posture change. Buttons at Lin turned towards 16Ds, with Lin set to the first Raider 6. It wasn't said, Lin please contact with the truth that immediately genches to get subsurface on the way. Lin request every mode effective that J-16Ds were quick to change the way on the world. Lin response came back in 11 seconds. Typhoon 11. Maintain visual on formation. Do not pursue. Typhoon 12 is cleared for ASW support corridor. Lin held position. The J-16D leveled off 200 meters below him and continued its lazy arc toward the south. Lin watched it. The Chinese pilot never looked up. 6:38 hours. Beneath the Taiwan Strait, Type 093 Shang class. The Type 093 came to periscope depth at 6:37. Its hull broke 18 meters of water column as it transitioned from deep quiet to shallow active. Commander Chen did not launch torpedoes. He did not deploy swimmers. What he did was transmit a 2.4-second burst communication on a VLF frequency that Taiwan's signals intelligence infrastructure detected but could not fully decode in the 138 seconds it remained active. What the burst transmission triggered was visible 14 minutes later. 0641 hours. Bashi Channel. south of Taiwan. The Bashi Channel is the 350-kilometer-wide deep-water passage between Taiwan and the Philippines. It is the PLA Navy's most direct route from the South China Sea into the Western Pacific. At 6:41, a Taiwanese Coast Guard vessel on routine patrol 80 kilometers south of Uluwampi reported visual contact on a surface formation. 5 vessels, a Renhai-class cruiser, 2 Luoyang 3 destroyers, 1 Type 054A frigate, and a Fuji-class replenishment ship. They were not transiting, they were holding, in formation, in the Bashi Channel, pointing north. The surface group had been at sea for 6 days under the cover of a routine South Sea Fleet exercise. It had not been flagged as a threat. It had not triggered any diplomatic protest. It had simply sailed south, loitered in international waters, and waited. Now, at 6:41, it turned north. The submarine had not been the operation. The air patrol had not been the operation. The submarine and the air patrol had been the two hands of a conjurer, drawing every eye in the room toward the center of the stage, while the actual threat entered quietly from the south. 6:44 hours. Hsinchu Kayak. Colonel Huang received 3 simultaneous reports in a 22-second window. The Bashi Channel Surface Group contact from Coast Guard. An updated sonar track showing the Type 093 now descending back to deep depth, retreating, its mission complete, and a SIGINT flash from the National Security Bureau indicating that Eastern Theater Command communications volume had spiked 340% in the last 4 minutes, with a high confidence assessment that the spike represented a command network activation consistent with an amphibious rehearsal protocol. Rehearsal, not execution, but the line between rehearsal and execution in PLA doctrine is a matter of political authorization, not operational readiness. Operationally, they were ready. Huang reached for the direct line to the Ministry of National Defense. He was already composing the request in his head. Immediate activation of the Hengshan Mountain Command Center, elevation of ROC Armed Forces to Defense Condition 2, and emergency notification to the American Institute in Taiwan requesting the presence of the senior Indo-PACOM liaison officer. He made the call at 6:45. The duty officer at the ministry answered on the second ring. By that time, Typhoon 11 and Typhoon 12 were already RTB, returning to base with full weapon loads. They had never fired. They had never needed to, because the purpose of this operation had never been to provoke a shootdown. It had been to demonstrate in clinical detail that Taiwan's defensive architecture had a geometry that could be exploited, that the space between an air intercept and a subsurface contact and a surface approach from the south was a space that Taiwan sensors covered in sequence, not simultaneously. That there was a 6-minute window, 6:38 to 6:44, during which no single command node in the ROC Armed Forces had a complete picture of all 3 threat vectors at the same time. 6 minutes. The PLA Eastern Theater Command had just published the length of the window they needed. 7:11 hours. American Institute in Taiwan, Taipei. The Indo-PACOM liaison officer, Captain David Hargreaves, USN, arrived at Hsinchu CAOC at 7:11 via military transport after a 19-minute scramble from the AIT compound. He was escorted directly to the CAOC operations floor, where Colonel Huang laid the full tactical picture in front of him without introduction or diplomatic preamble. The radar tracks, the sonar contact log, the burst transmission timestamp, the Bashi Channel Surface Group bearing and estimated speed of advance, the SIGINT spike from Eastern Theater Command. Hargreaves studied the display for 41 seconds without speaking. Then he said 4 words. They just ran a rehearsal. Huang nodded once. Second one in 7 days. The first one was the script, Hargreaves said. This one was the dress rehearsal. Huang pulled up the gap analysis his operations team had generated in the previous 25 minutes, the 6-minute window, the radar refresh lag, the ASW sensor dead zone between P3C sonobuoy coverage and the SH-60F response radius. 3 specific, measurable, addressable gaps, and one that was not addressable with current ROC assets because it required a second P3C orbit further south, and Taiwan had 4 P3Cs total, 2 of which were in scheduled maintenance. Hargreaves was already typing on his encrypted NipperNet terminal. At 7:19, USS Antietam, a Ticonderoga-class cruiser operating under the 7th Fleet's West Pac rotation, 340 nautical miles east of Taiwan, received a priority
security message from Indo-PACOM. It altered course 15 degrees west and increased speed to 28 knots. It did not broadcast this movement. It did not request diplomatic clearance. It moved because the assessment at Indo-PACOM was the same as the assessment at Hsinchu, that what the PLA had conducted this morning was not a patrol. It was an audit. 7:48 hours. Ministry of National Defense, Taipei. The ROC Defense Minister convened an emergency session of the National Security Council at 7:48. The session lasted 34 minutes. At its conclusion, 3 decisions had been made. First, Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone response threshold would be reduced from the current 90-second scramble authorization to a 60-second pre-authorization protocol for any PLA formation exceeding 4 aircraft crossing the median line. Second, an emergency procurement inquiry would be dispatched to Lockheed Martin regarding the accelerated delivery schedule for the 4 additional P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft already under contract. Delivery currently estimated at 2028, which the defense minister described, in language that was unusual for a closed session meeting, as not 2028 compatible with our security situation. Third, and most significantly, the ROC Navy would request a formal integrated ASW exercise with the U.S. 7th Fleet within 30 days to be conducted in the Bashi Channel approach corridor.
That third decision was the one that mattered, because integrated ASW exercises between Taiwan and the United States conducted in the Bashi Channel are not training events. They are political statements expressed in sonar pings and helicopter rotor wash. They are a message delivered in the language that the Eastern Theater Command understands most fluently. Presence. 8:03 hours. Beijing, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman issued a statement at 8:03 Beijing time, 11 minutes after the ROC-NSC session concluded. The statement described Iron Meridian, referred to only as routine joint combat readiness exercises in the Taiwan Strait, as a necessary and lawful response to separatist provocations and foreign interference in China's internal affairs. It warned that any escalatory actions by the Taiwan authorities or their external backers will be met with firm and resolute countermeasures. The statement did not acknowledge the submarine. It did not mention the Bashi Channel surface group, which had by now reversed course and was heading southwest at 14 knots, as quietly as it had arrived. The message had been sent. The audit had been completed. The window had been measured. What happened in the Taiwan Strait on the morning of May 27, 2026 was not a battle. No shots were fired. No aircraft were lost. No vessel was struck. By the metrics that make headlines, nothing happened. But in the metrics that decide wars before they start, reaction time, sensor coverage geometry, command network lag, inter-service coordination speed, an enormous amount happened. The PLA Eastern Theater Command now held a precise, validated, operationally current map of Taiwan's defensive seams. They knew the 6-minute window. They knew the ASW dead zone. They knew that Taiwan's P-3C fleet, at 2 operational airframes on any given day, cannot simultaneously cover the Strait and the Bashi Channel. They have not used that knowledge yet. But in military planning, knowledge of a gap is not a curiosity. It is a targeting coordinate. Taiwan's defenders know this. Colonel Huang knows this. The F-16V pilots who held formation over the Strait while a submarine moved beneath them know this. And somewhere, in a hardened bunker in Ningbo, the officers of the Eastern Theater Command know it too. The strait between Taiwan and the mainland is 180 kilometers at its widest point. On a clear day, you can almost see across it. The next patrol will be closer.